Silly question, but can you see my Tesla Model Y? Can you hear it? Chances are you can, but what about now? That was my Tesla Model Y, first stationary, then accelerating away. If you were a pedestrian, was that an issue for you? What about if we add an acoustic sound warning system to it? Would that help? Well, the answer isn't as straightforward as you think, so find out why in this video. Okay, first, a bit of background. The Australian Government is seeking feedback about acoustic vehicle alert systems for electric vehicles. As you heard in the introduction, some EVs like my Tesla and MG don't have an external speaker, meaning you only hear the sounds of the electric motors and tyres moving on whatever surface they're traversing. That means it can sound like this, this, or this. If you're a kid learning to navigate our streets, you would have been taught the stop, look, listen and think method. It's an education campaign designed to teach our kids car awareness, particularly around intersections where cars turn left or right, around driveways when parking or doing U-turns. It's at these moments that almost 37% of incidents involve pedestrians occur. So this paper got me thinking. Electric vehicles don't make as much sound as petrol and diesel types, meaning we've removed listen from this learning tool. Is it an issue? After all, we've had start-stop systems in cars for more than a decade. You know, the sort that turn the engine off when stationary. We've also had plug-in hybrid vehicles that also don't make any sound. So why now? Why is the Australian Government proposing that from 2025 or 2026 about mandating the requirement for these AVAS systems? This is a Hyundai Ioniq 5 which actually has a sound emitter fitted to it, and it generates sound up to 30 km per hour as the car speeds up and ascends from 50 to 56 decibels. It also makes a pitching down sound when slowing, and annoyingly, as soon as I put it in drive, yeah, it's still stationary, it makes this sound all the damn time. More on this later. Now, this car is just one of many that is actually compliant with UN Regulation 13801, which is actually adopted in many countries around the world, such as Europe, the UK, China, Japan, the US, and others. So, does this solve the issue? And do EVs actually pose a greater threat to pedestrians compared to, say, petrol or diesel cars?
In his brief about the need for EVs to be equipped with AVAS, it concludes that over a 35-year period, this device could save 65 lives and more than 5,000 injuries. However, I wasn't satisfied with its research and tried to find my own answers. Based upon the most up-to-date information in the Australian Infrastructure and Transport Statistics Yearbook of 2022, pedestrian deaths have been declining over the last decade, now at 132 per year, which still isn't good, and we'd all like to see this number at 0. Nonetheless, it is improving. For context, 132 deaths is 11% of 1,123 people killed on our roads. The majority of pedestrian accidents occurred in 50 to 60 km/h zones, which are not covered by AVAS, whereas 10% of deaths did occur in 40 km/h zones or less. That means 13 lives could potentially be saved per year if AVAS was fitted. Looking to pedestrian injuries, this figure unfortunately remains unchanged and accounts for more than 6% of 39,598 incidents per year. Even more worrisome in this figure is that 29% were children. Add to that another significant group, older adults and those with vision impairment or blindness.
Now, imagine you're completely blind. This is what your world can look like. Or this, in some forms of blindness. Those with low vision might be able to see some light, colours or shapes either appearing to be completely blurred, hazy or a mix of everything in between. That means they may have trouble judging distances and where they are in relation to them. And if you are blind, you have to imagine what and where something is in relation to you.
So let's explore some examples. This is a Tesla stopped, now accelerating to 20 km per hour. Now my MG ZS EV. And finally, the Ioniq 5.
You can appreciate the differences, can't you? I find the first two examples to be pretty scary if I couldn't see. What do you think?
In Australia, more than 66,000 people are blind and 575,000 are vision impaired. That's more than 2% of our population who have vision concerns and already a segment more vulnerable on our roads and in our car parks. On average, more than 160 pedestrian deaths occur every year on our roads, and sadly, 10 children die in our driveways. Given that we are all pedestrians at one point on any given day and we travel low kilometres relative to other road groups, the number of road fatalities of 11 or 13% is concerning. For the person who is injured, the effects of road trauma are devastating, such as severe, lifelong pain, disablement, and costing the Australian community more than $1.2 billion every year. For drivers involved, they too can suffer from reliving the traumatic event through flashbacks and nightmares, have trouble sleeping or feeling anxious, irritable, or easily startled. They may avoid anything that reminds them of the event, or perhaps they feel numb or cut off from society. Better known as post-traumatic stress disorder, it's quite common and something that I fortunately have not experienced and hopefully never will. So, does AVAS decrease accidents and does it save lives? I looked to Europe, where they've had these systems for longer than anywhere else in the world, and I couldn't find any research or publications that cite a decrease in pedestrian accidents because of AVAS. The data I did find mirrors ours, with pedestrian deaths relatively unchanged over an 8-year period. That means around 20 pedestrians die on EU roads every day. Most occur in urban areas, with a quarter of these accidents at crosswalks, most likely where there are lower speeds and an AVAS system is operating. Yet the road toll remains unchanged, and in a country that has EV ownership of greater than 10%.
Car companies have spent a fortune developing signature sounds that not only warn pedestrians of an EV nearby, but also help you identify them. Yeah, that's a Hans Zimmer BMW. Seriously, BMW paid a lot of money for their signature sound, and in my opinion, it's over the top and annoying. Could you imagine what this car park would be like if every single car made that Hans Zimmer sound? It'd be overwhelming, wouldn't it?
The World Health Organization estimates that in Western Europe, the number of years lost to disability or death due to noise pollution could be as high as 1 million. Separated out, 45,000 children are adversely affected. 903,000 individuals experience noise-induced sleep disturbances. 61,000 suffer from cardiovascular disease, and 22,000 may get tinnitus. That's a constant ringing in your ears. Now, to be clear, these numbers do not represent actual prevalence of disease or death per se. Rather, they're hypothecated to help legislators understand how noise-induced environments decrease quality of life and increase disability or death.
So, let me demonstrate the differences between 4 different worlds. First, what we experience every day right now. Just standing here, you can hear and see vehicles nearby. If you're blind, I think it's more pronounced. What do you reckon? Now, let's simulate an electric world with no AVAS fitted. Next, what if all vehicles were fitted with AVAS systems that don't emit a sound when stationary?
One last example, and this one I fear the most. AVAS fitted, but they make sound even when stationary. In UN Regulation 13801, it specifies frequency and decibel levels of acoustic emitters at certain speeds, but it also allows for manufacturers to decide if a sound is made when the car is stationary. What happens when we have not one, not two, but hundreds of EVs with AVAS? Do they multiply decibel levels? To answer this, I found this fascinating video by Integral Graphics that explores this physics principle and how sound pressure is not linear. He finds that adding a second speaker running at 50 decibels increases sound intensity to 53 decibels.
Could you imagine a car park at the end of a football game where everyone is trying to leave at once? How loud would it be with every single car emitting a sound at one time? It would be definitely overwhelming, unbearable, and actually I don't think it helped people who are vision impaired understand where things are.
Now, for balance and fairness, there is a flip side to this issue, and that's about distracted road users. The rise of smartphone use is definitely at play here, with research finding that around 20% of pedestrians use a smartphone when crossing a road. If you have your face buried in your phone, you are significantly higher of critical safety events, such as near misses, compared to those not using a smartphone.
And the same is true of motorists who might be distracted whilst driving, be it from fellow car occupants, your phone, infotainment system, or maybe even your smartwatch.
And so, based upon this research, the issue of AVAS and road safety is complicated yet relatively simple. We, as drivers, need to think about all road users. We, as pedestrians, need to be aware of vehicles around us. However, the one we can't control are children who don't have good judgment when it comes to cars, especially vision impaired or blind people. Accidents are just that. They're unplanned. We all think that we can see pedestrians in and around our vehicles, but when you're reversing out of your driveway or parking space, you might know where your kids are, but do you know where someone else's are? We all trust in technology that will save lives, like cameras, autonomous and emergency braking, or ultrasonic sensors, but they don't always work. Tesla is now removing ultrasonic sensors from its cars, and this worries me no end. Yep, this is bad, very bad. Speaking for myself and maybe you, we believe that we are all safe drivers and that would never hurt anyone. We think we know where pedestrians are, but kids are small and don't understand the dangers of cars. Blind people cannot see us. The elderly might misjudge the speed of vehicles approaching. And sadly, hundreds of pedestrians die each year and thousands more injured. And so, have I convinced you yet? Look at the paper's proposal. One option is to maintain the status quo, allowing market forces to decide what they will and won't do. However, I fear this could result in the Wild West where every car maker adds the bespoke noise to our environment, leaving all road users confused and everyone vulnerable. The second option is to mandate them through the introduction of a new Australian design rule. That would mean fitment of AVAS to all new electric vehicles entering the market. And that's an important note. This will be forward-looking legislation, not retrospective, so if your electric vehicle doesn't have it now, it won't need to be installed. This paper suggests by doing it, it could avoid 65 deaths, 2,569 serious injuries, and 2,845 minor injuries. That's over a 35-year period. In this paper, they state that this would amount to over $321 million in avoided road trauma costs. It would also mean healthier, happier people not dealing with lifelong injuries and PTSD. This is something that I think we all should strive for. So my preference is for all new cars to have them fitted as per Australian design rules that align to the European standard. That means they should only emit sound when moving, not stationary, up to a maximum of 20 km per hour, not 30, and either ascend or descend depending on speeding up or slowing down, and its volume is limited between 50 and 56 decibels. That's somewhere between a fridge running and a moderate to quiet conversation. I've thought about the alternatives, but it doesn't have redundancy. We can't rely on the person, the pedestrian, or the car. It needs to be a synergy of all three. That way we don't overwhelm road users with a cacophony of noise pollution and end up missing out on the improvements and benefits that electric vehicles can make. I'd like to hear from you, so comment below, or if you feel strongly about it, use the link below and submit a formal comment to the Australian Government about this ADR change. Before I started writing this paper, I actually thought I didn't want to, but having researched it, I've changed my mind, and I wonder, have you changed your mind too? If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, consider YouTube or Patreon support, and otherwise, you'll be good and you'll be great.